A child who had not spoken in 2 years finally laughed because a broke pastry chef from Queens destroyed the kitchen of the most feared mafia boss in New York. It was not magic. It was not medicine. It was not one of the expensive specialists Dante Moretti had paid in quiet desperation, hoping someone with enough degrees and soft voices could bring his daughter back from the silent place where grief had buried her. It was flour in the air like snow, butter smeared across black marble, a broken mixer coughing smoke, and Marabel lying flat on her back, with cake batter on her cheek, staring up at the gold ceiling of a penthouse she had no business being inside. By morning, everyone in Dante Moretti's private world would know her name. The guards would whisper it into hidden radios. The house staff would glance toward the kitchen with nervous wonder. The men who carried guns under their jackets would try to understand how a woman, with no elite references, no perfect uniform, no quiet obedience, and no fear of looking ridiculous, had done what none of them could do. She had made Lena Moretti laugh. And in Dante's world, where laughter had become more impossible than mercy, that sound changed everything. Marabel arrived at the Hotel Aurelia with $38 in her checking account, a cracked phone screen, and a black dress she had bought from a clearance rack 3 years earlier for funerals and job interviews. It pulled too tight around her hips when she sat down, and the sleeves pinched her upper arms, but it was the nicest thing she owned. She had brushed her dark curls into a loose bun, dabbed concealer under tired eyes, and told herself, in the subway window, that she looked professional enough to survive one strange interview. The job posting had been vague in a way that made her stomach uneasy. Private domestic position, live-in, childcare experience preferred, culinary background valued, discretion required, salary obscene enough to feel like a trap. Still, Mara had applied because rent did not care about pride, hospitals did not forgive unpaid balances, and grief did not come with a refund. Her father had been gone for 11 months, but the debt from his treatments still sat on her chest like a stone. His bakery in Queens, Bell's Sweet Corner, had closed after 41 years because Mara could not keep it open alone. Every time she passed the locked storefront, she felt like she had failed him twice. So when a woman with a cold voice called and told her to report to the private entrance of the Hotel Aurelia at noon, Mara went. The hotel rose over Midtown like a palace pretending to be polite. White stone, smoked glass, brass doors, fresh flowers in enormous vases, and people who looked like they had never once checked their bank balance before ordering coffee. Mara stood near the service entrance, clutching her worn tote bag, feeling sweat gather under her arms despite the winter chill. Delivery trucks growled behind her. Men in black suits watched from corners without moving their heads. Even the air seemed expensive. A tall guard with a shaved head opened the side door and looked her up and down. His eyes paused on the soft roundness of her stomach, the width of her hips, the scuffed flats on her feet. Mara knew that look. She had been collecting it her whole life. It was the quick, cruel math people did when they thought a body told them everything worth knowing. "Marabel?" he asked. "That depends," she said, before she could stop herself. "Is this the part where I find out the job is actually selling vitamins from a garage?" The guard blinked, as if no one at the Hotel Aurelia had ever joked near him before. Then he stepped aside. Mara followed him through a back hallway that smelled faintly of lemon polish and hidden kitchens. They passed locked doors, security panels, and staff members who lowered their eyes the second the guard appeared. No one spoke. No one laughed. It was like walking through a beautiful museum after something terrible had happened, and everyone had agreed not to mention it. The elevator waiting at the end of the hall had no buttons, only a small black scanner. The guard placed his thumb against it. A light flashed green. The doors opened without a sound. Mara stepped inside and tried not to stare when the elevator rose past numbers that should not have belonged to one building. Somewhere around the 60th floor, her ears popped. Her hands tightened around the strap of her tote. "So," she said, because silence made her nervous, and nerves made her mouth dangerous. "Is there a handbook for this place, or do I just guess which doors lead to my doom?" The guard looked at her again. This time, there was almost a smile. Almost. "You'll meet Mr. Moretti first," he said. The name moved through Mara like a cold draft. Moretti. Everyone in New York knew that name, even if they pretended not to. It belonged to hotel openings, charity galas, construction deals, court cases that vanished, witnesses who changed their minds, and men who stepped out of black cars while cameras suddenly turned away. Dante Moretti was not just rich. Rich people had magazines. Dante Moretti had silence. The elevator doors opened directly into another world. The penthouse above the Aurelia was so beautiful it felt unreal. Wide marble floors reflected soft gold light from hidden fixtures. Tall windows looked out over New York, turning the city into a glittering toy beneath the grey afternoon sky. There were velvet chairs no one seemed to sit in, art on the walls that looked old enough to have secrets, and flowers arranged with such perfect care they seemed afraid to wilt. But beneath all that beauty, the place felt cold. Not physically cold, worse than that, emotionally cold, like warmth had been removed on purpose. Two armed men stood near the far wall. A housekeeper moved silently past with a tray and did not lift her eyes. Somewhere deeper in the penthouse, a door closed softly. Then Dante Moretti walked in. Mara forgot every sentence she had planned. He was tall, dressed in a dark suit that fit him like it had been made around a warning. His black hair was combed back neatly, his jaw shadowed, his face calm in a way that felt less peaceful than controlled. He did not hurry. He did not need to. The room seemed to arrange itself around him. The guard near Mara straightened. The armed men became still. Even the faint hum of the city outside felt smaller. Dante's eyes landed on Mara. They were dark, steady, and unreadable. He did not look surprised by her size. He did not smile in that polite little way people used when they had already decided she was less than what they expected. He simply looked at her, fully and without apology, as if weighing not her body but her nerve. "Marabel," he said. His voice was low and smooth, the kind of voice that could calm a room or end one. "That's me," Mara answered. Her throat felt dry. "Former pastry chef. Current professional panic container." The guard coughed once behind her. Dante did not laugh, but something flickered in his eyes. "You understand this position requires discretion. I assumed that from the fingerprint elevator and the man with a gun standing next to the ficus." The guard's face went blank again. Dante took one slow step closer. "You are not easily intimidated." "Oh, I am," Mara said honestly. "I'm just also broke, tired, and from Queens. It creates a confusing personality blend." For the first time, Dante's mouth moved slightly. Not a smile, not yet, but close enough to make the whole room feel like it had tilted. He gestured toward a sitting area near the windows. Mara followed, careful not to slip on the marble. She sat on the edge of a pale sofa that probably cost more than her father's old bakery oven. Dante remained standing. "You were a pastry chef," he said. "I was. My dad owned a bakery. I worked there since I was 12. Cookies after school, wedding cakes in summer, cannoli shells at Christmas. The whole beautiful disaster. And now? Now the bakery is closed, my resume looks like it got lost in a storm, and I can make a 3-tier lemon cake while crying quietly in a walk-in freezer." Dante watched her for a long moment. "My daughter is 7, he said. "Her name is Lena. She has not spoken much since her mother died." The air changed. Mara felt it at once. The guards did not move, but their silence deepened. Dante's face did not break, but something behind his eyes pulled tight. "I'm sorry," Mara said softly. Dante looked toward the hallway. Several people have tried to help her. Tutors, therapists, nannies, specialists from places with names long enough to impress desperate parents. They all failed. Mara heard the warning under the words. They all failed. "Do not waste my time. Do not pretend you can save what I could not protect." "What did they do with her?" Mara asked. Dante's eyes returned to her. "They tried to make her speak." Mara nodded slowly. "That's usually where adults mess up." One of the guards glanced at her like she had just stepped in front of a moving train. "Explain," he said. Mara swallowed. Her instincts told her to soften the truth. Her bank account told her to be polite. But something about the lifeless penthouse, the silent staff, and the thought of a little girl trapped inside all this beauty made her chest ache. She lost her mother, Mara said. Maybe talking feels like opening a door she's not ready to open. Maybe everyone keeps standing outside that door yelling for her to come out, and she's tired. Kids know when adults are scared of their pain. They know when people are trying to fix them so the room feels better. Dante's face revealed nothing, but the guard by the wall shifted his weight. "And what would you do?" Dante asked. "I'd stop trying to drag words out of her. I'd sit beside her, bake something simple, let her choose colors, let her point, draw, nod, shake her head, or ignore me completely if she wants. I'd make the world near her feel safe enough that maybe one day she decides to come back to it." The silence after that was so deep Mara could hear her own heartbeat. Dante looked at her like she had put a hand on something he kept locked away. "You have no formal training in child therapy," he said. "No. No degrees in early childhood development. No. No references from elite families." Mara gave a tired little smile. "I once got 6 toddlers at a birthday party to stop screaming by letting them throw sprinkles at cupcakes. I understand that may not compare to a Harvard recommendation." Dante turned toward the hallway again. "You have 1 week." Mara blinked. "Wait, I'm hired? For 1 week. You will live here. You will follow security rules. You will not ask questions about my business. You will not take photographs. You will not leave this floor without permission. You will not speak to press, police, hotel staff, guests, or anyone outside my approved list. You will not lie to me." Mara stared at him. "That's a lot of knots. My world has consequences. So does mine," she said, surprising herself with how steady her voice came out. "I need half the first month's pay up front." A guard made a small sound of disbelief. Dante's eyes narrowed slightly. "For what reason?" "Because my landlord does not accept mysterious atmosphere as currency. Also, I have bills, very ugly ones." Dante studied her again, and for a second, Mara wondered if she had ruined everything. Then he took a phone from inside his jacket. "Give my office your account information," he said. "The advance will be transferred before dinner." Mara exhaled so hard her shoulders dropped. "Thank you," she said, and meant it. Dante did not answer. He only turned and led her down the hall. Lena Moretti's room was at the far end of the penthouse, behind a white door painted with tiny gold stars. It was larger than Mara's entire apartment, filled with expensive toys, arranged too neatly to look played with. A small canopy bed sat near the window. Shelves held books in perfect rows. A dollhouse stood untouched in the corner. And on the floor beside the bed sat Lena. She was small and pale, with dark curls falling around a serious little face. She wore blue pajamas, though it was the middle of the day, and she was drawing with a black crayon on thick paper. She did not look up when they entered. She only made the crayon move faster. Dante's whole presence changed in the doorway. The cold boss vanished just enough for Mara to glimpse the father beneath him, helpless and aching behind all that power. "Lena," he said gently, "this is Mara." The girl did not answer. Mara did not move closer. She lowered herself carefully onto the floor near the door, ignoring the pinch of her dress and the way Dante watched every movement. Sitting on marble was not kind to her knees, but she had worked bakery holiday rushes. She knew pain. She knew patience. "Hi, Lena," she said. "I'm Mara. I make cakes. Sometimes good ones. Sometimes ones that lean like they're tired of living." The crayon paused for half a second. Mara smiled but did not push. "I brought no worksheets, no feelings chart, and no weird puppet asking how your heart feels today. So that's good news." Still no answer. But Lena's crayon moved slower now. Mara reached into her tote and pulled out a small paper bag. Dante stiffened until she opened it and revealed a plain butter cookie wrapped in wax paper. "I made this yesterday," Mara said. "It's not fancy. Just butter, sugar, vanilla, flour, and a little hope because my oven is dramatic." She placed it on the floor halfway between them. Lena looked at the cookie, then at Mara. Her eyes were huge, guarded, and far too old for 7. Mara leaned back against the wall. You don't have to eat it. You can judge it silently if you want. I respect a tough critic. For 3 long minutes, nothing happened. Dante stood in the doorway like a carved statue, every part of him held tight. Mara watched the city light move across the floor and let the quiet breathe. Then Lena reached out, took the cookie, and placed it beside her drawing, not eating it, not rejecting it, just accepting its presence. Mara felt Dante's shock before she saw it. That's fair, Mara said softly. Cookies also need time to introduce themselves. That evening, Mara was shown to a bedroom that looked like a magazine had dreamed it, and then hired staff. There were fresh clothes folded on the bed, toiletries in the bathroom, and a view of the city glowing like spilled jewels. She should have felt lucky. Instead, she felt like she had been placed inside a very expensive locked box. Dinner was quiet. Dante sat at one end of a long table. Lena sat at the other, touching nothing but a few pieces of bread. Mara sat awkwardly between them, trying not to feel like a bright, round, underdressed mistake in a room full of sharp edges. After dinner, Lena disappeared back to her room. Mara found herself standing in the penthouse kitchen, staring at polished counters, copper pans, and equipment so perfect it made her fingers itch. The kitchen was too clean. Not clean like cared for, clean like no one loved it. A small drawing sat near the fruit bowl. Mara picked it up before thinking. It showed a cake, a lopsided pink cake with 7 candles and tiny yellow stars around it. Behind her, the floor creaked. Lena stood in the doorway. Mara looked at the drawing, then back at the girl. Is this a request or a warning? Lena did not speak, but her eyes moved to the pantry, then to the oven, then back to Mara. Mara's heart squeezed. Oh, she whispered. You want cake. Lena looked down. Mara glanced at the clock, then at the spotless kitchen, then toward the hallway where men with guns guarded a home that felt like it had forgotten birthdays existed. Well, Mara said, tying a linen towel around her waist like an apron. Your father gave me 1 week. Might as well start with a felony against this kitchen. Lena stayed in the doorway at first. Mara moved around carefully, narrating in a low, warm voice as she found flour, sugar, eggs, butter, vanilla, cream, and a block of chocolate so expensive it made her whisper an apology before chopping it. She did not ask Lena to help. She only made room. After a while, Lena stepped closer. Mara slid a bowl toward her. You can stir if you want, or supervise with silent judgment. Both are valuable positions. Lena touched the spoon. That was how the disaster began. The first problem was the mixer. It looked beautiful, but had the temperament of a wild animal. Mara clicked it on low, or what she thought was low, and the machine roared to life with a violence that sent flour bursting upward in a thick white cloud. Lena jumped back. Mara grabbed for the bowl, knocked over the sugar, stepped into spilled oil from a bottle she had opened too fast, and slid across the marble with both arms windmilling. No, no, no. Absolutely not. I am too young to be taken out by cake batter, she yelped. Her foot hit the edge of a rug. The mixing bowl tipped. Buttercream flew. Something cracked. Mara landed on her back with a soft thud, staring up through the falling flour as the mixer made one last sad grinding sound and died. For 1 terrible second, there was only silence. Mara closed her eyes. I would like the record to show that the cake attacked first. A small sound came from across the kitchen. Mara opened one eye. Lena had both hands over her mouth. Her shoulders were shaking. Then she laughed. It was tiny at first, rusty and uncertain, like a sound finding its way through a locked door. Then it grew, a real laugh. Bright, surprised, breathless. Lena laughed so hard she had to hold onto the counter. Mara lay in the flour, too stunned to move. At the far entrance of the kitchen, Dante Moretti stood frozen. He must have come running at the crash. His jacket was gone, his gun was in his hand, and his face was carved with the terror of a man ready to kill whatever had threatened his child. But no enemy waited in the kitchen. Only broken equipment, spilled sugar, Mara covered in batter, and Lena laughing with flour on her eyelashes. Dante slowly lowered the gun. His eyes moved to his daughter. The sound hit him like a wound and a miracle at the same time. His hand tightened around the weapon until his knuckles went pale. His mouth parted slightly, but no words came. Lena looked at him and seemed to realize he was there. Her laughter faded, but it did not vanish completely. She stepped behind Mara's fallen shape, as if Mara were somehow safer than the Marble Island, the armed guards, and the most feared man in New York. Mara carefully pushed herself up on one elbow. Her cheeks burned. Her dress was ruined. Her hair had escaped its bun. She had buttercream on her chin and humiliation in her bones. "I can explain," she said. Dante stared at her, then at the destroyed kitchen, then back at Lena, whose tiny fingers had curled around the edge of Mara's sleeve. "No," he said quietly. Mara swallowed. "No?" His voice dropped, softer than she thought it could be. "Do not explain." He put the gun away and stepped into the kitchen like a man entering a church after years of forgetting how to pray. His eyes stayed on Lena. She did not run from him, but she did not move closer either. Dante crouched several feet away, careful, controlled, giving his daughter space in his own home for perhaps the first time in too long. "Lena," he whispered. The little girl looked at him. Dante's face trembled once, barely enough for anyone else to notice. Mara noticed. Of course she did. Bakers noticed cracks before collapse. Daughters noticed grief in fathers. Broke women noticed desperation in powerful men, because desperation had the same shape everywhere. Lena did not speak, but she pointed at Mara, then at the broken mixer. Dante looked at Mara, lying in the ruins of chocolate and flour. For one wild second, Mara thought he might be angry. He had every reason to be. She had destroyed what was probably a $5,000 machine on her first night. She had turned his perfect kitchen into a crime scene for dessert. Instead, Dante Moretti did something no one in the room expected. He laughed once. It was low, rough, and almost unwilling, like the sound had been dragged out of him against years of discipline. But it was there. Lena heard it. Mara heard it. Even the guards in the hallway seemed to forget how to breathe. Mara sat up fully, brushing flour from her face. "Great. Wonderful. The terrifying employer is laughing. That's either good or the last thing people hear before disappearing." Dante's eyes met hers. Something passed between them then. Not romance. Not yet. Something quieter and more dangerous. Recognition, maybe. Gratitude sharpened by fear. A question neither of them was ready to ask. "Who are you, Marabel? And how did you walk into my dead house and make it breathe?" Lena tugged Mara's sleeve once and pointed at the cake pan, still miraculously upright on the counter. Mara followed her gaze. The batter inside was uneven but salvageable. "Well," Mara said, pushing herself to her feet with as much dignity as a flour-covered woman could manage. "The mixer died bravely, but the cake may yet survive." Dante stood too. He reached for a towel and handed it to her. His fingers brushed hers for one brief second. His hand was warm, steady, and much too careful for a man with blood in his reputation. Mara looked up at him. For the first time since she entered the penthouse, Dante did not seem like a monster, or a king, or a warning whispered behind locked doors. He looked like a tired father watching the first small light return to his child's eyes. And Mara, with cake batter on her cheek and fear tucked under her ribs, realized the job was no longer just a job. Somewhere inside this beautiful silent fortress, there was a little girl reaching for laughter, a father drowning in all the things he could not fix, and a hidden danger moving through locked rooms with keys it should not have. Mara did not know about Silas Crane watching from the security office below. She did not know about the messages already sent to the Virelli family, or the photographs taken of Lena's bedroom, or the loose tile in the pantry where a secret phone slept in the dark. She only knew that Lena had laughed, and in Dante Moretti's world, joy was not a small thing. Joy was a threat. Joy was a threat because it showed where the walls were weakest. In Dante Moretti's world, fear was useful, silence was useful. Locked doors, armed men, tinted glass, and rules spoken in low voices had kept him alive for years. But laughter was wild. Laughter moved without permission. It slipped through cracks, touched old wounds, and reminded people that they still had something left to lose. That night, after Lena's small laugh faded back into quiet, the penthouse did not feel the same. The marble still shone. The guards still watched the doors. The city still glittered below like a field of cold stars. But something warm had entered the rooms, and no one knew what to do with it. Mara stayed in the kitchen long after the cake came out of the oven. It was crooked, too dense on one side, and frosted in uneven pink swirls, because Lena had insisted on holding the spatula with both hands. Dante stood near the counter, pretending to read messages on his phone, but Mara saw him look up every time Lena moved. The little girl did not speak, yet she did not hide. She stood on a small stool beside Mara, placing sugar stars across the cake with careful fingers, her dark curls falling into her face. Once, when Mara hummed an old song her father used to play in the bakery, Lena leaned softly against her arm and stayed there. Dante saw that too. His face stayed calm, but his hand closed around the edge of the counter, as if the sight had knocked the breath out of him. Mara did not point it out. Some moments were too fragile for words. She only reached over, brushed a little frosting from Lena's cheek, and said, "Your cake is already more successful than my last relationship. So honestly, great work." Lena's mouth curved. Not a laugh this time, but close enough. By the next morning, the penthouse had begun to change in small ways that made the staff uneasy. Mara opened curtains Dante had left closed for months. She moved fresh flowers from the formal hall into Lena's room because, as she told a shocked maid, flowers don't need to impress the elevator. She asked the kitchen staff for cinnamon, nutmeg, cardamom, brown sugar, apples, and music. When no one moved fast enough, she found the speaker system herself and filled the kitchen with old soul songs from Queens, the kind her father used to play before sunrise while kneading dough. The guards hated it at first. Their eyes followed her as she crossed the penthouse barefoot in soft pants and an oversized sweater, hair tied up messily, flower on one sleeve, talking to Lena like the girl was simply quiet instead of broken. But by the third day, one guard had started lingering near the kitchen door whenever she made coffee cake. By the fourth, the housekeeper smiled at Lena when she carried a tray past the island. By the fifth, Lena was following Mara everywhere. She followed her to the pantry. She followed her to the laundry room. She followed her to the small balcony garden Dante never used. She sat beside Mara on the floor and drew pictures while Mara sorted through recipes on her phone. Most of the drawings were dark at first. Tall buildings, black cars, a woman with long hair lying on the ground beneath red scribbles, a small girl with no mouth. Mara never took the drawings away. She never gasped. She never told Lena not to think about scary things. She just sat with her and sometimes drew something beside it. A candle, a blanket, a slice of cake, a big round woman with wild hair standing between the little girl and the dark. One afternoon, Lena pushed a drawing into Mara's lap. It showed 3 people in a kitchen. Dante was drawn very tall in black. Lena was small in blue. Mara was in yellow, much wider than the others. Arms stretched around both of them like a soft wall. Mara looked at it for a long time. Her throat tightened so fast she had to swallow twice. "I like yellow," she whispered. Lena rested her head against Mara's shoulder. That evening, Dante found them asleep on the couch in Lena's room. Lena was curled into Mara's side, her small hand gripping the edge of Mara's sweater. Mara's head rested at an awkward angle against the cushions, her mouth slightly open, one sock halfway off. A children's movie played quietly on the wall screen. For a long time, Dante did not move. He stood in the doorway with his hands in his pockets and stared at the two of them, as if he had walked into someone else's dream. Silas Crane watched from the security monitor 2 floors below. Silas had served the Moretti household for 9 years. He knew the codes, the schedules, the staff rotations, the guard shifts, the hidden service doors, the quiet weaknesses in Dante's fortress. He had watched specialists come and go. He had watched Lena grow smaller inside herself. He had watched Dante become colder, crueler, less human with every passing season. but he had never seen anything disturb the penthouse like Marabel. She was not polished. She did not belong. She laughed too loudly, asked too many questions, moved things without permission, and made staff forget fear for seconds at a time. Worst of all, Dante looked at her. That was what Silas reported that night through the hidden phone behind the loose tile in the pantry. The woman is becoming important. The child trusts her. Dante watches her closely. Move soon. The answer came back only a minute later. Then use her. Mara found Dante bleeding on the 6th night. She had gone down the service hall after midnight because she could not sleep. The penthouse was too quiet, and quiet always made her remember the last nights of her father's illness, when she had listened to machines breathe for him. She wanted tea, maybe toast, maybe 5 minutes in the kitchen with the soft lights on. Instead, she found Dante leaning against the wall near the private service elevator, one hand pressed to his side, his white shirt dark with blood. For one frozen second, they only stared at each other. Then Mara dropped the mug in her hand. It shattered on the floor. Dante pushed away from the wall. Go back to your room. Mara stared at him like he had lost his mind. You're bleeding. It's not serious. There is blood on your shoe, Dante. His jaw tightened. Mara. No. Sit down. The command landed in the hallway like a slap. One of Dante's guards, already pale with panic, looked at her as if she had just told a storm to kneel. Dante's eyes sharpened. No one spoke to him like that. No one who wanted to remain standing. Mara stepped closer, her own fear burning into anger. You hired me to take care of your daughter. That means I need you alive enough to be her father. Sit down before you fall down, and make this more dramatic than it already is. The guard looked ready to pray. Dante stared at Mara for one long, dangerous moment. Then, slowly, he sat on the low bench against the wall. Mara exhaled and turned to the guard. First aid kit, towels, hot water, and maybe stop looking at me like I just performed witchcraft. The wound was ugly but not deep enough to kill him. A blade had caught him under the ribs during a meeting with the Virelli family, he explained in clipped pieces, while Mara cleaned the blood with shaking hands. The Virellis had been circling his businesses for months. They wanted his hotel, his ports, his people. Most of all, they wanted revenge for old losses Dante refused to discuss. Mara tried to focus on the wound, and not on the hard warmth of his body under her hands. Up close, he did not smell like cologne and danger the way she had expected. He smelled like rain, iron, and tired skin. His face was turned away, but she could see the faint lines beside his eyes. He looked less like a monster in that hallway, more like a man who had learned to become one, because gentleness had cost him too much. You should have a doctor, she said. I have one on call. Then call him. I wanted to see Lena first. Mara's hands slowed. Dante looked down at her. When her mother died, I was not there fast enough. His voice stayed controlled, but the pain underneath it was raw and old. Mara pressed clean gauze to his side. You can't bleed your way into forgiveness. He gave a quiet, humorless breath. You say very dangerous things. I bake for a living. We're reckless people. Something softened in his eyes. The hallway felt smaller suddenly, the space between them strangely warm. Dante reached up and touched a streak of flour still caught in Mara's hair from earlier that day. His fingers were gentle, careful, almost unsure. You brought sound back into my home, he said. Mara's chest tightened. Lena brought it back. I was just on the floor when it happened. No, Dante said quietly. You saw her without fear. That is rare here. Mara looked down at his hand near hers. His knuckles were bruised. His life was violence, but in that moment, he touched her as if she were something delicate. I'm not fearless, she whispered. I know. The words should not have felt intimate, but they did. He knew she was scared. He saw it. The thought unsettled her more than the blood. Before either of them could say more, a faint buzz came from the pantry down the hall. Mara looked over. Dante's eyes sharpened at once. What was that? I don't know. She stood before he could stop her. The pantry was dark except for a thin strip of light under the door. Mara opened it and heard the buzz again, faint and hidden. It took her a minute of searching behind jars, flour bins, and stacked tins before her fingers found the loose tile. She pulled it back. A phone sat inside the wall. Its screen glowed with a new message. Service elevator route confirmed. Child's room camera active. Take her when Moretti moves. Mara's blood went cold. Dante appeared behind her so silently she nearly dropped the phone. He took one look at the screen, and every trace of the wounded father vanished. The man who replaced him was deadly still. "Who has access to this pantry?" Mara whispered. Dante did not answer because footsteps sounded behind them. Silas Crane stood in the doorway, holding a small pistol pointed at Mara's chest. His face was calm, almost bored, as if this were only another household task. "Mr. Moretti," Silas said softly, "you should have let the girl stay silent." For 1 second, the whole world narrowed to the small black circle of the gun. Mara could hear her pulse in her ears. Dante's body shifted in front of her, despite the blood soaking through his bandage. Silas smiled. "Don't move. You're injured, and I know exactly how fast you are when you're not." Dante's voice was low. "How long?" "Long enough." Silas's eyes moved to Mara. The Varellis paid well, but this one made things difficult. The child was easier when she trusted no one. Mara's fear flashed white-hot into rage. "You were taking pictures of Lena's room," she said. Silas shrugged. "Children of powerful men are not children, they are leverage." Mara moved before she thought. Her hand closed around the nearest pot on the stove, where sugar syrup still boiled from the caramel she had been making earlier. She flung it with a cry. The hot sugar hit Silas's arm and shoulder. He screamed, firing wild. The shot cracked through the pantry and shattered a glass jar inches from Mara's head. Dante lunged, but his injury slowed him. Silas slammed the gun against Dante's wound, forcing him back with a groan. Mara grabbed the marble rolling pin from the counter with both hands and swung with every ounce of strength in her body. It connected with Silas's wrist. The gun clattered across the floor. Silas turned on her, face twisted with pain and fury. "You stupid, desperate woman!" He rushed her. Mara hit him again, not cleanly, but hard enough to send him stumbling into the shelves. Jars crashed. Flour exploded. Dante came from behind him like a shadow and drove him into the wall with a force that shook the pantry door. The fight was short after that. Dante was injured, but rage carried him. By the time the guards reached them, Silas was on the floor, groaning, with Dante's knee in his back and a knife at his throat. Mara stood shaking, gripping the rolling pin like a weapon from a fairy tale gone wrong. Dante looked up at her. His eyes were wild, not with anger at her, but fear for her. "Are you hurt?" Mara looked down at herself. Her hands were trembling. A thin cut marked her cheek from the broken glass, but she barely felt it. "No," she whispered, "but Lena." Dante was already moving. Within an hour, the penthouse was no longer safe. Guards swept rooms. Staff were locked down and questioned. Security feeds were checked and found corrupted. Silas had not been alone in his betrayal. The beautiful fortress above the hotel had been hollowed from the inside. Dante did not waste time mourning the illusion of control. He wrapped Lena in a coat, placed one hand at Mara's back, and led them through a hidden service door behind the wine room. Mara carried a bag with Lena's favorite drawings, 2 sweaters, a tin of cookies, and the rolling pin, because she was not ready to let it go. They did not take the main elevator. They descended through old service passages behind the hotel walls, down metal stairs, and through tunnels that smelled of dust, stone, and old secrets. Lena held Mara's hand the entire way. Dante walked ahead with a gun in one hand, blood darkening his shirt again, his men moving around him like shadows. "Where are we going?" Mara asked softly. "Brooklyn," Dante said. "Somewhere they won't expect." The place was an old theater near the river, hidden behind a shuttered facade and a sign with half the bulbs burned out. Inside, it smelled like velvet, rain, and memories. Rows of faded red seats faced a stage heavy with dust. Painted angels stared down from the ceiling, Old dressing rooms lined the backstage halls, and beneath the floor ran forgotten tunnels from another century. Dante's mother had loved the theater, he told Mara later, after Lena finally fell asleep in a blanket fort made from velvet curtains. His family had used it long before he was born, back when his grandfather needed a quiet place to meet men who preferred darkness. Dante had kept it because he could not make himself sell the last thing his mother had touched with joy. The storm started before dawn. Rain hit the roof like fingers tapping warnings. For a while, the theater felt almost safe. Mara turned one dressing room into a bedroom for Lena. She found old costumes and let Lena choose a purple cape, a feathered hat, and a pair of silver gloves. Lena did not speak, but she moved with more life than Mara had seen yet. She placed the cape around Mara's shoulders too, then drew them both as queens under a stage light. Dante watched from the doorway. "You're staring again," Mara said without looking up. "I am thinking. That sounds dangerous." It usually is. Later, in the theater's old kitchen, Dante cooked for her. Mara expected one of his men to do it, but Dante rolled up his sleeves and moved with quiet skill. He made pasta by hand, simple and careful, flouring the counter with the same seriousness other men might bring to war. Mara sat on a stool, tired and bruised, watching the feared head of the Moretti family knead dough like a man remembering a prayer. "My mother taught me," he said. "She believed feeding someone was the first form of loyalty." Mara smiled softly. "Your mother was right. She would have liked you." The words settled between them. Mara looked down, suddenly shy in a way she hated. "She never met me." She knew courage when she saw it. Dante stepped closer. The old kitchen was lit by one yellow lamp, the storm pressing shadows against the windows. Mara could hear Lena sleeping in the next room, one of Dante's guards outside the door. Rain above them, danger somewhere beyond all of it. But in that small pocket of warmth, Dante looked only at her. "You should leave when this is over," he said. Mara's heart pulled tight. "That's a strange thing to say while making me dinner. I am not a safe man." "No," she said. "But you're not only that." His jaw flexed. "Mara, you think warning me makes this simple?" She stood, close enough now to see the exhaustion in his eyes. "But I've seen you with Lena. I saw you crouch in your own kitchen, like you were afraid to scare her with how much you love her. I saw you bleed, and still try to reach her room first. You're dangerous, Dante. I'm not confused about that. But you're also a father who has been living like a locked door." Something in him broke quietly. He touched her face, thumb careful near the cut on her cheek. "And you opened it." Mara's breath shook. When he kissed her, it was not sudden or cruel. It was slow, deep, and almost afraid at first, as if he knew one wrong movement could ruin the only gentle thing left in his life. Mara kissed him back with all the fear and warmth she had been holding in her chest. His hand settled at her waist, not hiding her body, not handling her like something too much, but holding her like she belonged exactly where she stood. For the first time in years, Mara did not feel like a woman made of apologies. She felt steady, wanted, seen. Then the power went out. The theater dropped into blackness. A second later, emergency lights flickered on, washing the backstage halls in a dim red glow. Dante pulled away, all softness gone. A distant crash echoed from beneath the stage. His men shouted. The Varellis had found them. Dante pushed Mara behind him, but she was already running toward Lena. The little girl woke without crying, eyes wide as Mara scooped her from the blanket fort and wrapped her in the purple cape. Gunfire cracked somewhere below, sharp and terrifying in the old theater. Dante's guards fought in the halls. Rain hammered the roof. The red lights made everything look like a nightmare trying to become real. Dante led them under the stage to a hidden room behind a trapdoor. The space was small, lined with old brick and dusty trunks. "Stay here," he said, pressing a small emergency radio into Lena's hand. "Do you remember what I showed you?" Lena stared at him, silent and shaking. Dante's face twisted with pain, but he nodded like she had answered. "Good girl." He looked at Mara. "Do not open this door for anyone but me." Mara grabbed his wrist. "Come back." His eyes held hers. Always. Then he was gone. For a few minutes, there was only the sound of fighting above them, and Lena's small breaths against Mara's chest. Mara held her close and whispered nonsense because anything was better than fear. She talked about cake, about queens, about how her father once dropped 12 pies on Thanksgiving morning and still sold every one as rustic. Lena's fingers clutched the radio. Then a scraping sound came from the wall. Mara turned slowly. A metal grate near the ceiling shifted. A man's hand appeared through the opening. Silas had told them. Mara's heart nearly stopped. An enforcer squeezed through the old ventilation shaft and dropped into the room with a heavy thud. He was broad, wet from the storm, with a knife in one hand and a smile that made Mara's blood run cold. "There she is," he murmured. "The little princess." Mara placed Lena behind her. "No," she said. The man looked at her body and laughed. "Move." Mara's fear was huge. It filled her throat, her hands, her knees. She was bruised. She was outmatched. She was not trained for this. She was a pastry chef who knew how to fold dough, calm children, stretch money, and survive grief. But Lena's hands were gripping the back of her sweater, and that made the fear change shape. It became strength. The man stepped forward. Mara grabbed the first thing within reach, an old stage prop sword from a trunk. It was dull, heavy, and ridiculous, but she swung it with both hands. It hit his arm hard enough to make him curse. He lunged. She ducked badly, stumbled, and slammed into a broken spotlight stand. Pain burst through her shoulder, but she grabbed the stand and drove it into his stomach. He doubled over. Lena made a tiny, frightened sound behind her. That sound kept Mara standing. The man grabbed her hair and threw her sideways. She hit the floor, breath knocked from her lungs. The knife cut across her arm as she rolled. He reached for Lena. Mara screamed and came up with the prop sword again, swinging not like a fighter, but like a woman who had decided she would rather die than move. The blade struck his face. He reeled back, furious, and raised the knife. The hidden door burst open. Dante entered like a storm. What happened next was fast and terrible, and saved them. Dante took the man down with a violence Mara would never forget. But it was not mindless. It was focused entirely away from her, away from Lena, toward the threat that had entered their small place of safety. When it was over, Dante turned at once and dropped to his knees in front of them. Lena ran into his arms. Mara pressed a hand to her bleeding arm and tried not to fall over. Dante looked at her wound, then her face, and his expression cracked. "You protected her," he whispered. Mara gave a shaky breath. "I told you. Reckless people, bakers." The theater was lost. More men were coming. Dante's guards were holding them back, but not for long. He lifted Lena, wrapped his other arm around Mara, and led them into an escape tunnel beneath the stage. The passage sloped downward through damp brick and old darkness, opening at last near the East River, where the storm hit them full force. They were almost to the waiting cars when headlights cut through the rain. A black SUV blocked the dock road. Enzo Varelli stepped out beneath the flood of stormwater, smiling like a man who had waited years for this moment. He was older than Dante, silver-haired, elegant, and cruel in a quiet way. Two of his men flanked him with guns raised. Dante pushed Mara and Lena behind him, but his gun clicked empty. Enzo heard it and smiled wider. "Dante Moretti," he called through the rain. The great king, hiding behind a child and a fat baker. Mara felt Lena shake against her. Dante stood tall, despite the blood, the rain, and the empty weapon in his hand. "This ends with me." Enzo laughed. "It began with you. Your wife died because of you. Your daughter stopped speaking because of you. And now this woman bleeds because she was foolish enough to love what was already ruined." Mara stepped beside Dante. He turned sharply. "Mara, no." She held Lena close with one arm and lifted her chin into the rain. "You think they make him weak," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "That's because you don't understand family. You only understand leverage." Enzo's eyes narrowed. Mara kept going. His love for Lena did not make him weak, it kept him human. And if you can't see the difference, that is why you'll never have what he has. For a second, only rain answered. Then Lena moved. She lifted the emergency radio with both trembling hands. Her lips parted. Mara felt it before she heard it. Dante went completely still. Lena pressed the button. In a small, broken whisper, she said, "Starlight home." Dante's face changed as if the whole world had stopped. The phrase crackled through the radio. Once, twice. Then floodlights exploded on along the river dock, bright as day. Engines roared from both sides of the road. Dante's loyal men poured from the shadows where they had been waiting for the distress signal tied to that code. Enzo spun, blinded and trapped, his confidence breaking for the first time. Dante moved fast. His men moved faster. Enzo Varelli went down in the white glare of the dock lights, his empire collapsing in the rain around him. But Dante did not look at Enzo. He looked at Lena. His daughter stared up at him, soaked and shaking, the radio still in her hands. Then, with tears on her face and rain in her hair, Lena turned to Mara. "I want to go home," she said. The words were soft, clear, real. Mara covered her mouth as a sob broke through her. Dante gathered Lena into his arms, holding her so tightly Mara thought he might never let go. His eyes closed, and for the first time since Mara had met him, Dante Moretti did not look controlled. He looked saved and destroyed by the same miracle. They did not return to the penthouse that night. Dante took them to a private medical suite hidden inside one of his buildings, where doctors stitched Mara's arm, cleaned Dante's wounds, and checked Lena while the little girl refused to let go of Mara's fingers. By sunrise, the storm had passed. The city outside the windows looked washed clean, though Mara knew nothing in Dante's world was ever that simple. 2 days later, Dante came to Mara's room with a folder in his hand. She was sitting near the window, arm bandaged, wearing one of his oversized sweaters because her clothes had been ruined. Lena was asleep in the chair beside her, curled under a blanket with her drawings tucked close. Dante placed the folder on Mara's lap. "What is this?" she asked. "Your debts." Mara opened it slowly. Her stomach dropped. Page after page showed hospital bills, loan transfers, collection notices, names she recognized, and companies she did not. Then she saw the signatures tying several of them to shell accounts connected to the Varelli family. Her mouth went dry. "They bought my debt," she whispered. "Yes," Dante said. "They intended to use your desperation. If Silas failed, they planned to pressure you into betraying me." Mara closed her eyes. For a moment, shame rose out of old habit, sharp and familiar. She had thought her struggles were just failure. Bad luck, grief, weight, exhaustion. All the heavy things she had carried alone. Now she saw hands had been pulling at her from the dark. Dante knelt in front of her. "The debts are gone," he said. "All of them. Your father's bakery has been restored to your name. The building, the licenses, the back taxes, everything. It is yours again." Mara stared at him. Her eyes filled before she could stop them. "Dante, you owe me nothing," he said. "Not for Lena, not for the money, not for any of this. If you want to leave, I will put guards on you from a distance and make sure no one touches your life again. You are free." Mara looked at him, this dangerous man who had taken lives, carried grief like a second skin, and still somehow learned to kneel before her with freedom in his hands. Then she looked at Lena sleeping beside her, one small hand curled around the yellow drawing of the three of them in the kitchen. Mara touched the folder, then set it aside. "I spent a long time thinking home was a place I lost," she said softly. "The bakery, my dad, the life I had before everything got hard. But maybe home is also what you build after the fire. Maybe it's the people who make room for you when you stop trying to shrink." Dante did not move. He barely seemed to breathe. Mara reached for his hand. "I'm not staying because I owe you," she said. "I'm staying because I love Lena, and because somewhere between the flower explosion, the secret tunnels, and almost being murdered by a man in a ventilation shaft, I fell in love with you too." Dante closed his eyes. His hand tightened around hers like the words had wounded him in the best possible way. When he kissed her this time, it tasted like relief. Months later, Belle's Sweet Corner reopened in Queens, with a line around the block. No one knew exactly how Mara had paid for the renovations, though the new ovens were top of the line, the windows gleamed, and the sign above the door looked just like her father's old one, only brighter. People came for the pastries, but they stayed because the place felt warm. It smelled like butter, coffee, sugar, and second chances. In the back kitchen, Lena sat on a stool drawing labels for cookies. She spoke more now, not always, not for everyone, but enough that each word still felt like a gift. Sometimes she helped Mara knead dough. Sometimes she sat quietly and leaned against her side. Dante visited after dark, entering through the rear door with 2 guards outside, and softness in his eyes that only appeared in that bakery. He was still Dante Moretti. His enemies still feared him. His name still moved through New York in whispers. The empire did not vanish because love entered it, but it changed. Men who threatened children disappeared from his world. Deals that touched innocent families ended before they began. Dante's violence became more controlled, more exact, no longer the only language he knew. And Mara became the heart of the Moretti family, not because she fit into Dante's world, but because she refused to become cold enough for it. She filled his penthouse with bread, music, color, and the stubborn sound of life. She wore yellow when she wanted, red when she felt brave, soft sweaters when she was tired, and never again apologized for the space she took up. Her body, once mocked by strangers and measured by cruelty, became Lena's safe place, Dante's comfort, and her own proof that softness could stand between a child and danger without breaking. One evening, long after the Virelli name had fallen into frightened silence, Mara stood in the bakery doorway, watching Dante teach Lena how to roll dough. He was terrible at it, too serious, pressing too hard, while Lena corrected him with the patience of a tiny queen. Mara laughed, and Dante looked up. The old fear was still there sometimes. The world was not gentle just because they had found gentleness with each other, but the bakery lights were warm. Lena was smiling. Dante's hands were covered in flour, and for once, the most powerful thing in the room was not money, blood, or a hidden gun. It was love, steady and stubborn, rising like bread in a warm kitchen. Marabel had not saved Dante Moretti by becoming dangerous like him. She had saved him by staying warm in a world that tried to freeze her. She had walked into a silent house with empty pockets, tired eyes, and a heart everyone had underestimated, and she had left behind laughter, courage, and a family rebuilt from broken pieces. And in the end, the empire did not bow to fear. It came home for cake,